I want to bring in my guest right now, Jeremy Butler. He's CEO of Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America. And Jeremy, you know, I saw polls that might not have surprised you, but me a little bit. The president did pretty good 4 years ago when active duty folks were polled and they voted in support of the president. But now he's trailing Biden by 6 points. Can you put your finger on as to why?
Well, I think it's actually pretty complicated. You know, I think we've learned certainly from the last election as well as leading up to now that you never want to fully trust the polls. But I think the key takeaway here is really that the American public probably doesn't realize that the military as an organization is far more complex and diverse than people generally think. But I think what we've seen throughout Trump's campaign when he was running 4 years ago and now throughout his presidency is that he sends mixed signals. You see things like what he has said. You were just showing them, what he said about John McCain, what he said about various generals and admirals throughout the time. But then what you also see is that he pushes for very high defense budgets. And so I think a lot of militaries try to look at more of what he does and less of what he says.
So, Jeremy, in addition to, military not being as homogenous as people thought, but coming to your latter point about what he said versus what he did, what struck me was what General Mattis had to say. And this was right after what we saw at Lafayette Park. He said, among other things in that powerful editorial, that Trump is the first president in my lifetime who wrote, "It does not try to unite the American people, doesn't even pretend to try. Instead, he tries to divide us. We're witnessing the consequences of 3 years of this deliberate effort. We're witnessing the consequences of 3 years without mature leadership. Instructions given by the military departments to our troops before the Normandy invasion reminded soldiers that the Nazi slogan for destroying us was divide and conquer. Our American answer is, in union there's strength. You must summon that unity to surmount this crisis, confident we're better than our politics." To that end, the idea of using U.S. troops on American soldiers, you're close to both active and retired military. How did that sit with them?
It didn't sit well, and I think you saw that pretty broadly expressed by active duty personnel. Certainly the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff came out and said that he was wrong to have appeared there. And I think you saw that echoed throughout most of the military. They don't want to be used as props. And I think you saw that pretty well expressed after the Lafayette Square incident.
I got to tell you one thing, that unless I was the biggest diehard Trump guy, if I saw my president do or not do with what he did with the Bountygate story, the idea that we have actionable intelligence to at least merit our commander-in-chief to investigate whether the Russians are paying the Taliban to kill American soldiers, and the president, after getting that briefing, and if he didn't read the briefing, shame on him, in 8 separate conversations either tried to advance Russian interests or never once even asking the question, would personally tell me a lot about what he thought about me. I got to think, with so many stories out there, that one must have really sat in the craw of a lot of military.
That was one of those incidents in which we really got a lot of different bits of information. You just talked about what the president said. Well, at the same time, the Secretary of State was apparently having relatively strong conversations with his counterparts in Russia on the bounty issue. So you're getting mixed messages on intelligence and things like that. And that's unfortunate because I think at the end of the day, the Bountygate issue, the idea about the Russians paying bounties to the Taliban is kind of one in many incidents where we're letting our adversaries win by dividing us in terms of what is the real key takeaway, which is that the Russians are trying to play to their strength. And whether or not you believe in the bounties, there's so many other areas in which we know that the Russians are playing to divide us as a nation. And frankly, they're winning because we continue to have these conversations.
Finally, Jeremy, you're a Navy guy. The whole Navy SEAL story where we pardon war criminals, and you had careers, if not marginalized, even ruined, of the guys who came forward to say this is not what we stand for. And yet the president coming down not just on that isolated incident, but in other cases as well, taking the sides about people who didn't present the American military the way that we want here and committed war crimes in many cases, defending them over the guys who did it the right way. I got to think for people who take their military service seriously, that also was certainly a major debit when it comes to this president.
Yeah, I think he touched on one of the areas in which we unfortunately didn't have enough conversation. Most of the discussion around the pardons was really on the servicemen who were being pardoned, and not on the fact that pretty much across the board, they had been judged by their fellow service members. That's the way the military justice system works. In various cases, you had service members who were later pardoned who had been subjected to court-martial. They had their fellow service members testify against them, and they were all hung out to dry, frankly. All those who came forward did the right thing and testified about what they saw, what they took part in, what those who had been accused were doing or not doing, and frankly, all that was cast aside.
Well, Jeremy, thank you for the time, and also for your service. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard.